Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. All right. I've got a really special guest with me today. Nic, good to see you again. How are you?
Hey, Tony. Good. Great to be here. Great to catch up with you again.
Yeah. I had, for those of you following us for a long time, Nic was on an earlier podcast, I think before the whole world went crazy, right? I mean, was it?
Well, I think the world's always been crazy. It was before it got crazier.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Nic does, and it's probably easier for him to explain it because it's a very simple problem, but it's a very complex situation. And Nic is the are you the founder or the owner, or you got partners? Tell me about.
I'm the founder.
Okay, so gang, in recent times, and everyone, you know this, Nic, my audience is mostly law enforcement, military, martial artists, CrossFitters, that whole gamut. And everyone's aware of the human trafficking problem. And it's gotten a lot of press and exposure, certainly with Sound of Freedom, and it's all over the place. And of course, Epstein didn't kill himself and all of that. Like, we can catch this guy and this guy, but we don't know a single person who is on the island. And I don't know if that's going to get me canceled by YouTube, but having Nic on and other people who are trying to fight this and expose this problem is really, really important. And one of the things, I'm just going to say this as a father of two girls and a boy, and they're all grown up, just the idea that this could happen and does happen with astronomical numbers. Most of you have no idea the numbers. I'm going to have Nic regurgitate them, because you need to understand how insane this is. Not just the revenue, but the amount of people and the destruction of lives, and nobody really knows what to do about it. We put up a black square on Instagram and we go, all this shit. But I wanted to talk to Nic and learn more about what's happened in the last few years with his company, what he's doing, and some important reframes, because almost everyone listening here has kids. And if you don't have kids, you're an aunt or an uncle, or you've got somebody who could be impacted by this, and how they're going to be impacted is not how you think. A lot of us think it's going to be mysterious. It's a kidnapping. They went on what's that shit when the kids go away on spring break, where they got drugged, and that happens, and it's awful. But how it's happening, certainly in America or more modern countries, is a lot more insidious, and Nic's an expert on all this shit. But Nic, tell the audience a little bit about just your background from special operations and leading up to here. So it's the elevator speech. We're locked in the elevator, and I'm like, what do you do, man?
Sure. So again, Tony, thanks a lot for helping me get the word out about this, about this problem, and educate people, as you coined first, to be their own bodyguard and to be the bodyguard to their children. So I'm Nic McKinley. I'm the founder of DeliverFund. I spent 10 years in the Air Force pararescue teams. Those of you who don't know what that is, it's the Air Force's ground special operations component, and then was recruited to a specialized unit within the CIA, where we facilitated the accomplishment of intelligence operations in high threat areas. So my entire career was counterterrorism and counter narcotics related, all international. And at the CIA, especially, I started to witness human trafficking kind of happening everywhere. And I'm one of the biggest book nerds you'll ever meet. And when I get curious about something, I really start diving into the data and the literature on it. And what I learned in doing that was that dollar for dollar, the largest human trafficking market in the world is the United States of America. We
Jeez.
are the problem. And yet, if you look at the law enforcement community, we have the most amazing law enforcement officers in the world. And these are people who put their lives on the line, obviously daily, to keep us safe. And I try to help, your standard civilian understand that I don't care what kind of ninja skills I was trained in and, going overseas and doing that work. At the end of the day, when I was in Afghanistan, my family was here. I had zero ability to affect their safety. And were it not for the law enforcement and fire and rescue and, all the frontline responders who were standing watch while I was overseas, well, my family would have been in significantly more danger. So we're law enforcement's biggest fan. And we exist as an entity to equip, train, and advise law enforcement and the general public and industry in how to detect human trafficking here in America so that we can keep our kids safe. So that's the quick down and dirty about who I am and what we do.
How long has DeliverFund been around?
DeliverFund's been around for about 10 years.
Nice.
We've only been operational for about 8 of that.
Okay. I remember on our first talk, you shared just some of the numbers of kids, adults, like revenue that this generates. Let's shock the audience, because I don't think people realize how fucking insane this is. This is like drugs, guns. Where does human trafficking sit in terms of revenue generated in business?
So depending what's going on in the world, it's the third or fourth largest illicit commodity market. And I'll use a lot of economics language because I'm an economics nerd. But when I say illicit commodity market, what I'm talking about is a market that specifically exists to traffic in a specific thing, right? So we have a narcotics market, we have a weapons market. We obviously have a financial fraud market. The prince from Nigeria isn't sending all those emails just because, he's bored. They send those emails because they get paid to do so. So it's, and then you have human trafficking. Now, when we talk about human trafficking, there's lots of different components to human trafficking. The human trafficking that happens in Dubai is very different than the human trafficking that happens in Cambodia, is different than the human trafficking that happens in the United States of America. When we talk about the word human trafficking, what we are talking about is societal predators who are either defrauding, forcing, or coercing somebody, another person, into performing service or labor for the trafficker's economic benefit. And that's really important for people to understand, is that it means that one person's doing a thing and another person is getting paid for the thing that they're doing. It's not a border issue. It's not the people coming across the border that's human smuggling. Now those people are vulnerable to trafficking, but one is not the other. It's not a prostitution issue, as it often gets conflated and confused with. This is primarily American men purchasing time with American girls and women from American human traffickers. And that's by the Department of Justice's own statistics. Over 85% of the human trafficking victims in their cases are American citizens. Over 80% of the human traffickers are American citizens. And almost, not all, but almost all of the customers are American citizens. So we can look at the big numbers and say, okay, well, there's human trafficking is very different around the world. There's over, 20 plus million slaves around the world right now. Okay, but what does that mean to the parent in Detroit? What does that mean to the parent in Santa Monica? It's a, there's all kinds of statistics around the actual size of the market. Some people say it's as big as $150 billion a year industry. All right, but what does that mean to the parent in Nebraska? Here's the statistic that I like people to focus on the most. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, absolutely phenomenal organization out of Washington, D.C. They found that over a 5-year period, they had an 846% increase in suspected child trafficking cases. Now, why did that happen? How can you have what is essentially an 846% increase in a market over such a short period of time? Well, when you overlay that data, and then on top of that, you lay the adoption of smartphones and the innovations of social media apps, you see almost a 1-to-1 correlation. The reason that we've seen such an explosion in human and child trafficking and child exploitation in the United States of America is because our smartphones, which are just broadband connected computers that are in our pockets, right?
Right.
Those smartphones have given predators access to prey at scale. So for the first time in the history of the world, a non-familial 40-year-old man can contact a 12-year-old girl who's 3,000 miles away, who just made a TikTok video saying she's mad at her dad, can actually contact her at the very point of vulnerability. That's the problem that we're dealing with. And that's what we've learned in all of our operations with law enforcement, is that this is not the man with free candy, right, driving that through your neighborhood to abduct your child. I mean, do child abductions happen? Yes. And they're very sad when they do, stranger abductions. But of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's abduction cases, 0.0001% of them are stranger abductions. So your child, to the parents listening, or anybody who cares about a child has roughly the same chance of getting struck by lightning as they do being abducted by a child. Or I'm sorry, being abducted by a stranger.
Yeah.
What actually happens, what happens in over 90% of the National Center's cases, is you have a child who gets contacted online by a predator, is groomed over a period of weeks to months to sometimes even more than a year, and then that predator manipulates them and convinces them to run away from home to go join the predator. That's the reality of human trafficking in the United States of America.
That's insane. And I just shot out a little message to everyone. We're live on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook now, and so this can get shared around. I just sent out a message like, if you know a conscientious parent, make sure they watch this, because we don't even think about it. And it's the world has changed so much that and everyone is so woke and so scared to microaggress anybody, that I can even see, if you sat down and you said to a mother or father, you need to check your kids' text messages, they're like, I would never do that.
Right. And what about my child's right to privacy? I hear that a lot.
Right. And it's nuts. It's nuts. So that's a psychological game, and it's scary. I got a million thoughts running through my head. I do have a question. We'll go back and then pivot back to this, because this is central to all of your entrepreneurial wizardry, as far as the new app, and as far as how you're using the internet and data and stuff like that to help like flush stuff up. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure a lot of people, if you have lured a 12-year-old who you know what you're looking for, right? Somebody who's angry with their parents, they're at home, they hate their friends, and you befriend them and you create this connection. Does that person end up are they in the sex trade ultimately? Because you made a distinction that human trafficking and prostitution are different, but ultimately, like this 800% increase, are most of these people then put into some sort of sex trade?
Yes. So the predominant form of human trafficking that we find in the United States is going to be, you're talking true human trafficking and child exploitation, is going to be commercial sex in nature. So you've got the 14-year-old girl, 15, 16-year-old girl who is trafficked. She gets advertised on a commercial sex advertising site, and what appears to be prostitution, and gets advertised as a 22-year-old. So for a lot of, and I get a lot of heat from, men in our current culture, but I will absolutely die on this hill. If you are a man and you are participating in the commercial sex industry, there is 100% chance that you are feeding money into the human trafficking industry. Like that is a statement of fact, and anybody wants to debate that with me publicly, send me a location and I'll be happy to do it. So, and it's the same with a lot of that amateur pornography that you see on OnlyFans and websites, the different model cam site type things. You see the same thing, and you even we're starting to see the same thing in strip clubs, where traffickers will actually make their victims go dance at a strip club and do shows and whatnot, and then we'll actually post on their social media them walking out of these strip clubs with like huge trash bags full of $1 bills. It's not the girl walking out with that. It's the trafficker walking out with that. And traffickers are, for the most part, most of them are pretty brutal. They do not, obviously they're mentally ill, because that's the only explanation I can come up with for why somebody would exploit and harm a child or another person in the way that they do. Right? This is not defensive. These are offensive scumbags. Yeah. And so they will make money from that person in whatever way they can. The lowest risk way is to advertise them online in what appears to be prostitution or prostitution advertisement, but it's actually trafficking.
And obviously, and I don't know that it matters in terms of the solution and what you're doing, and I want to get to that. Just kind of like unpacking some of this for people who maybe you hear about it in the news and you go, that's awful, and then you go to work, oh my God, that's awful, and you like the post and you write horrifying, and then you go to work. The man, I got a million questions about it, because it pisses me off. But the reality of this is these people they're very dangerous people who are running these things. The kind of Reader's Digest is most of the problem is in America, which is I think counterintuitive to a lot of people listening to this, because other than our elections, we're not a third world country, right? In our minds, right?
Well, some of the lawfare makes us look a lot like a banana republic,
right?
But yes,
I'm joking. We absolutely we're like if Banana Republic met 5-star hotel, right? That's what we are. It's just, we do Banana Republic, but we do it with like Gucci and Louis Vuitton type marketing. It's insane what has been going on, and this is all part of it. But this has been going on for like forever, right? Like
right.
Slavery has been around since the beginning of time. I don't know where you want to, and you lead this because you're really the expert. I'm fascinated with this. I think anyone listening to this would go, and especially most of the people in my audience are people who do their best to take care of themselves. They've got better situational awareness than the average person. Even the most recreational person who listens to me is somebody who might go, yeah, I should really do a spear course or be your own bodyguard course, or, I'm going to join a gym. They're thinking about improving stuff. Everyone else is already like doing some sort of training. But even for me, it's like I remember when you launched the new app, you said, hey, you know, go check it out. Like, I want people to know about it. Let me know. You don't have to buy it. Just go check it out and let me know what you think. Well, I bought it to support it, right? But I don't know, like how can everyone listening to this help? And maybe there's like 6 things that you want to talk about before that would make whatever we can do more compelling. Because a lot of it is, unless I'm standing here and I see, my neighbor walk out on the street and do one of the cliche things where he's like going, hey, have you seen my dog? And I see him, that guy's tricking that kid into like, right. I can go stop that. But what you're talking about is noxious, right? You guys look that up, right? You don't see this. It's noxious. It's someone thinking they've got a new pen pal, online, and they go in and suddenly they're in a bad situation. So why don't you redirect that there where it kind of like summarizes with, here's what citizens around the world, mostly in America, can do to help. But there's got to be some
to help with the fight. And what I like people to understand is, like, so Tony, you are an absolute expert, one of the premier experts in helping people understand how to think about their security in the physical world. The exact same principles apply to the cyber world. They are now the actual application and the things that you do are different, right? No amount of getting strong and flexible is going to help you be more safe in the cyber world, right? And that's what we want to help everybody understand. There's a really interesting book that was written by the former general counsel of Microsoft, and it's called, I believe it's called Tools and Weapons, because this is a tool and a weapon. And I don't just mean in that, yes, you can, if you hold it the right way, you can freaking hit somebody in the side of the neck with it and use it as a weapon. I mean that this smartphone, right? Internet connected broadband computer. Like, I want people to understand that these are computers, the gaming consoles, the Xboxes, the PlayStations, the, things like that. Those are computers, and they're connected to the internet, which means that if they have a ability to communicate with them, which they all do, there's chat rooms and things in all of them, then that means that predators can access whoever is on the other side of that. So anything that children gravitate towards, call it like Roblox or, Call of Duty or anything like that, anything that a child is going to gravitate towards, guess who else is going to gravitate towards that?
Predators.
Child predators. Sure. Yeah. Right, because they're going to be looking for their prey. So you think about it through the same lens. So you teach people how to be situationally aware. Right? I conduct myself differently walking down the street in Albuquerque, New Mexico, than I do in Kalispell, Montana. Doesn't mean I won't have a problem in Kalispell, Montana. It's just the probability is a whole lot higher. So when it comes to the internet, the things that parents need to understand is that just because something is for children does not make it safer. In fact, it actually makes it less safe for your child, because that means that the predator will be attracted to that. Right. So most parents are not playing Roblox. They're not playing Minecraft. They're not playing these games that are targeted towards, preteen adolescents, but child predators are, because they know that there's a bunch of preteen adolescents on those games. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like putting a gun-free zone sign on a door, and you don't see active shooters like running into gun shops, or, like the classic barroom scene in Beverly Hills Cop. When those two guys came in, and it's not realizing it was a cop bar, right? I mean, what a great scene,
right?
So
nobody's trying to knock over a Hell's Angels bar, and so that's that's the mentality that people need to think about. So situational awareness applies in the physical world. You apply that same situational awareness to the cyber world. So the first is to be aware of what's happening. So if you're listening to this, if you take anything away, it's understand that the applications the games, the Xboxes, the whatever that are targeted towards your children, that means that those environments are target environments for predators.
They're magnets for the maggots. The
right.
Can I ask you this? Just popped in my head, but have you or when will you release a book or a video for parents, like a class? Like this is how you talk to kids. This is
so that brings me actually, yeah, that brings me to my second point, which is get educated about what the problem really is. And you can do that. We've made that pretty easy at DeliverFund.org. You can actually sign up for our Human Trafficking 101 class, get your little certificate.
Pop the website.
And in many cases, it actually will meet the human trafficking training for whatever state you live in. That sometimes is actually mandated. And then we have a course that's called Digital Defense for Parents that will be coming out very shortly. I don't have the actual time frame on it, but it'll be coming out shortly, and it will actually focus specifically on this digital space. So think of it as be your own bodyguard, but for cyberspace.
I love it.
So that's the second piece. The first piece is obviously be aware. The second piece is get trained, and then third, you got to take action. But what does that actually mean? Right. And that's really hard because you usually, especially from a defensive posture, you're always only taking action after somebody has taken action against you. So it's important to understand how traffickers work and how, people trying to exploit your children and children writ large work. The way that they work is they, slide into your child's DMs or hit them up in a group chat, and they actually start grooming them is the language that we use, because they have a process for this. It starts by just befriending them and then gaining their trust, and then starting to alienate them from their family and their friends and their circle, and then eventually get them to, in many cases, just run away willingly from where they're at and go be with who they think is going to be somebody's going to take care of them, somebody's going to be their friend, but actually is going to end up trafficking them. So once you know how that works, right, as I heard Dave Grossman say once, and it stayed with me for a long time, forewarned is forearmed. And so once you know how that works, well, now you know how you can take action against it. So when the predator starts talking to your child, you can't assume that every single person talking to your child online is a predator. But what they will try to do is they will try to get them into a private conversation, or they will do what we call off-platforming them, which is where they give them a phone number or an email address or something to move them away from that game and into some type of private or encrypted communication. So that could be WhatsApp, it could be Signal, Trima, any of the encrypted applications that are all basically the same. And then once they get them in that private communication, that's when the grooming really starts happening, and they're trying to get them to do things that they'll later regret or that they can use to manipulate them further. So let's say a child, somebody sends a phone number to the child and says, hey, hit me up on Signal or hit me up on WhatsApp at this number. Well, if that number, you put that number in our app and it comes back as a red flag, that means there's a positive connection between that number and a commercial sex advertisement. That is a true statement of fact.
Let's talk about your app for a second, because you just launched this, and because you jumped to the app and nobody knows about the app. Tell us about the app.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I guess that was a little confusing.
I don't know. It's good. It's great.
Yeah. So at DeliverFund, let me actually go back a little bit, and talk about a little bit about what we do. Okay. Yes, I've got a special ops background and a CIA operative background, and got 30 combat deployments under my belt. And so people think that, we DeliverFund, we must be kicking doors and rescuing victims and stuff. No, that's law enforcement's job. In fact, law enforcement absolutely hates the rogue vigilantes that go out and do that work, because it puts the cases at risk. It means that traffickers don't actually get arrested, and it makes the law enforcement officer's job harder. So what we do is we equip, train, and advise law enforcement, industry partners, and now the general public. We equip them with data and technology. we train them in what it is that they need to know, and then we advise them. So in the case of law enforcement, we advise them with intelligence, and same thing with parents, and then also some know-how, and we help them stay up to date on the shifts within the trafficking market. In the process of doing that, we have developed the largest, cleanest potential human trafficking database in existence. We collect hundreds of thousands of times more data than whole governments do. So what we have done is we have made some of that data, not all of it, not the law enforcement only stuff, but the public data we've made available and easy to query through an app that you can just download on the App Store. Because no amount of expertise from DeliverFund is going to fight this problem at the scale it exists. We need moms and dads and teachers and jujitsu coaches and soccer coaches and the everyday person to get involved in the fight. And the analogy I like to use here is imagine society as a forest. And traditionally, the way that we have fought human trafficking is by, the announcements at the airport and law enforcement conducting operations. So think of that as just that strategy is a large spotlight that's shining into the forest. Well, what happens when you do that? Yeah, you illuminate a little bit of the forest, but you create the trees create a lot of shadows. And so what we are doing with this app is we're giving everybody in the forest a flashlight. So there's no place for these traffickers to hide. So this has become the largest crowdsourced operation to identify unknown human traffickers and child predators in the history of the world. That's what people are participating in when they download our app. So kind of back to the original thing that I was talking about. If that trafficker is trying to off-platform your child, you put that phone number into our app and it comes back as a positive hit. You get a red flag. That lets you know that you need to cease communications with that phone number immediately, and then it'll also allow you to report the number, which tags that data for future use by DeliverFund analysts and law enforcement, and it will then take you to a landing page that will give you the best next step on what to do and how to think about the problem, because it's too much. A friend of mine introduced me to this concept, and every parent will know what I'm talking about as soon as I say it, of parental workload. The parental workload on parents today is absolutely extreme. Not only do you have to work your job, which because of the remote work environment has become nearly 24/7, and feed your children and educate your children and do all the things you have to do for your children, but now you're expected to also be an expert on these smart devices and knowing how to keep your children safe on these. And it's too much for parents, especially parents, to be able to handle. So in effort to actually reduce the parental workload, we've created this app which then allows the parent to actually at least have a starting point on knowing how to think about a potential child predator talking to their child.
So just as a dad, obviously, and everyone listening to this, you got to have a very trusting relationship with your kids to be able to say, hey, I've got this app, there is this risk. If anybody, even if they send you a picture and it looks like a 14-year-old boy, and he's telling you he's an up-and-coming actor in LA and you're in love with him, give me his phone number. Let's pop it in here and see if it turns red. You got to have that relationship with them. Does the app do all the work for you, or do you got to like once it's red, talk us through? Because you said it goes into the database and all that, but I know, like with me, if I've got a company that hasn't thought out their user-friendly or not process, I'm like, open this, click this. I'm like, I'm out of here. What happens? I pop in a number, turns red. What happens?
Then a report button pops up.
Nice.
You just click that report button, and then it will automatically bring up a link if you want to get further information. It's that simple. I mean, there's so few actions that you can actually take within the app. Once you download and subscribe to the app, then it gives you access to the data. It's that simple, and it's so cheap. It's $1.99 a month. Apple takes 30% of that off the top, and so by subscribing to the app, and the more people that do it, the more it allows us to keep these servers and supercomputers that are doing all the math behind the scenes, allows us to keep those running. And then for industry partners who, like as an example, hotel, motels, Airbnb, Ubers, who want to screen through their customer base at scale. Well, obviously the app, one phone number at a time, is not the way to do it when you got millions of customers. So we actually provide solutions directly to those industry partners. And then law enforcement as well. Not only can law enforcement use the app, but we have a whole technology stack called the Platform for the Analysis and Targeting of Human Traffickers that's available to law enforcement for free. And so any law enforcement officers who fight human trafficking or want access to human trafficking, law enforcement only human trafficking data, just have to contact us and we'll get them set up.
Is it just working in the US, or is it international? You can put an international number in.
Yeah, so we have international data that's primarily for our industry partners, but we don't do international cases anymore at DeliverFund. There's lots of different folks who are playing around with that. We primarily just focus on the human trafficking problem here in the United States. And obviously, while the trafficking happening in Cambodia and Colombia, Mexico is very, very sad, the reason we focus here in the United States is because what about our children? Now, a lot of that trafficking that happens overseas actually is being driven by the American dollar. So it's American pedophiles, it's American sickos that are going overseas and participating in that. It's a whole lot better, cheaper, and faster to catch them here in the United States than it is to try to only catch them overseas.
Sound of Freedom launched a few months ago. Crazy how many, and I don't, all the conspiracy theory, but all the, the sound wasn't playing here and it couldn't be played here and couldn't be, the whole Hollywood connection, all that stuff. All that aside, I think what you're describing as the cyber issue is very different than that. A lot of people saw that. They were outraged. Talk to us a little bit about that. Of course, awful, but at scale, what's going on with the phones, I mean, on a regular basis. And I hate it too. Like, I sit down to dinner with my kids and, everyone's got their phone at the table still, right? And me and mom, and it's like, I don't even know. It's awful, but it's just there. And going back to your, it's a tool or a weapon, what's it there for? But that aside, talk about the sound of freedom, because a lot of people are impacted emotionally with that. But what you're describing is incredibly different.
Yes. So if you live in Guatemala, Colombia, Mexico, Cambodia, that sound of freedom narrative very much applies to you. And that's not to take away from, the good work that people are doing in those places. But if you are a parent in the United States of America or a westernized country, so Canada, Germany, France, someplace like that, that's not the narrative that is applicable to you. The narrative that's applicable to you is you told your daughter she can't wear the miniskirt to school and grounded her, and she went into her room and made a TikTok video saying she was mad at her dad. And a trafficker starts talking to her and grooming her and manipulating her under your own roof.
Right.
I tell a lot of people that they're the biggest vulnerability in their home is not, the quality of the locks on their doors. It's their knowledge about what is coming into their home through their internet router. That's the biggest problem that we have. And so, and again, when you look at the NCMEC data, it's 0.0001% of the cases are stranger abductions, and over 90% of them are endangered runaways, which is a fancy way of saying a child that was predominantly groomed online and willingly runs away from their family into the arms of a trafficker.
And this is just a little pivot, but very often, everyone who follows me knows I've been shadow banned on Instagram for 3 years now, because I share in stories over and over again the insanity going on. But very often the common theme when I post anything, whether it's about the experimental liquids that they're getting us to try to get us to consume, to the Banana Republic nonsense and mail-in ballots and all that other shit. What I post the most, and just like this past week, I posted one where I think it was 3 or 4 people glued themselves to part of the tennis stadium during the U.S. Open.
Oh yeah,
right?
I saw that. Yeah,
but my story was, good job, parents. Good job, school. Like, what type of education and home and home environment produced adults that go? Can you imagine you and I, Nick? We get off this podcast and we're outraged by something that we go, let's go glue our feet to the fucking floor here and to draw attention to this cause. It's fucking insane how insane people are. But this is decades in, and in many ways, all of the communist socialist shit is grooming too. Different, maybe a misuse of that word, but it's the same psychology. Excuse me. And what you're doing is you're slowly manipulating behavior so that people do this Manchurian candidate like bullshit where I don't know, I'm off on a fucking tangent here. But where I was going with this is, you said something that was very impactful, is like, this is happening under your own roof.
right.
And you will never, as a parent, and there's a lot of parents listening now, you will never as a parent be able to have that conversation with your son or your daughter when they're most vulnerable if you're fucking up things as a parent. And if you're fucking up things as a parent, they are more likely to be the endangered runaway, or more likely to glue their feet to a fucking tennis stadium. So get your shit together, parents.
I guess all the time, what's the biggest thing a parent can do? And my response is always the same. The number one thing a parent can do to reduce the chances that their child becomes a victim of human trafficking or child exploitation is to be a good parent. That's full stop. And when you look at the data, and it's conclusive, it's not up for debate. The number one risk factor for young girls, adolescents, and teen girls becoming a victim of human trafficking is the same as it is for a male becoming a juvenile delinquent. It's lack of a positive male role model in their life. Doesn't have to be a dad, but it's got to be a positive male role model. Then you add lack of a positive female role model. So for the children who don't have either of those, I mean, it's actually shocking, the ones that don't become a victim of exploitation or trafficking. And so be a good dad, be a good mom, be nosy, and actually, like, your child doesn't have a right to privacy. That's why you're their parent, right? So just do the hard parent stuff, but also having such a trusting relationship with your children so that you're talking to them beforehand, right? You got to train before the incident. You got to make a plan before the incident. And this is no different. So to say, look, if you ever do anything online, you send a picture you really regret and wish you wouldn't have sent, or somebody's trying to exploit you, somebody's trying to blackmail you, somebody's trying to tell you that if you don't do what they say, that they're going to release things online or something like that, you come tell me being the parent first, and then we will work through this together, and you will not be in trouble for making mistakes. I mean, I'm sure same when you were growing up, Tony, but God, if the internet had been around when I was growing up, I would probably be in jail, because there would be documentation for some of the things that I did. And so, children today have it so much harder than we ever had it, because there are things that I did in high school that I'm not proud of and nobody will ever know about. And that was every child in existence until the modern age, when it was children are doing things they're not proud of and people are videoing it and putting it on TikTok and putting it on Instagram.
Everything's documented. And then, and something, and you go, oh, everyone listening to this has seen the, and I, I haven't been able to 100% verify it, but it's been so frequently, like what kids can see and do in China on TikTok, completely different than here. So somebody's controlling.
That's very true.
Yeah,
so that's very true. And I like to help people understand that there is no like internet, like the internet as one large thing is this ethereal concept that we talk about in order to be able to explain things in conversation. But the internet in Russia is different than the internet in China, which is different than the internet in India, which is different than the internet in the United States of America. In fact, where I live in Montana, we actually, our state just passed our state legislature passed a law that goes into effect in January outlawing TikTok in the state of Montana. So now you're going to have a different internet in Montana than you have in, the other states. And there are other states that have similar laws. And so this ethereal cloud that we call the internet is not this magic thing that is up in the sky, right? It is servers, it is hardware and communications lines that are controlled by human beings and controlled by companies. And those human beings and those companies, they all have incentives. Some of them are perverse incentives. Some of them are incentives that are aligned in ways that we don't particularly care for, but they all have incentives in order to control that infrastructure in a way that benefits them the most. So if you understand that just foundationally as a first principle, then you understand better how to navigate that terrain. And it's no different for any gaming app or social media platform that your children have access to. They are motivated by the number of users. They are motivated by the time spent on the apps and in the game and by the engagement. And the math works, to the detriment of the user. So it's like when you see people or hear people that say, oh, like, I'm not susceptible to marketing. Well, anybody who thinks that is probably more susceptible to marketing than anybody else. Right. And so if you don't take steps in order to protect yourself and say, I understand that Instagram and all these companies have dopamine algorithms that are specifically designed in order to make me feel good. So if I don't take active steps to say that, and by the way, those same algorithms work even better on your children. So if I don't take active steps to actually detach my child away from this device, it will eventually consume them. And it actually helps, these algorithms actually help the trafficker, because a trafficker knows that they can create like as an example, you probably have a Gmail address or something like that, right? Some type of internet email address. How much did you pay for that address? Nothing.
Zero. Yeah.
Because you are the payment. You are the product. If you don't know who's paying for something, then that means that you're the product. And so these traffickers can do the same thing. So they set up, their Facebook account, their fake Instagram account, or their fake gaming account, and then they know that they just need to go out and connect with a bunch of kids, and for them it's a numbers game, right? And to make the math easy here, like let's just look at this as a sales funnel, just like any other business professional has. So they know that they need to contact 100 children in order to get 50 to accept the request, in order to get 25 to communicate with them, in order to get 10 to communicate with them in a meaningful way, in order to get 5 to do something that they regret, in order to get 2 to agree to meet with them, in order to get 1 to actually show up. And that one person who shows up represents over $90,000 in tax-free income to that trafficker. And when you consider the barrier to entry to that market is so low,
Mhm.
It's contacting 100 children costs them nothing. In fact, the algorithms help them because they contact 15 of your children's friends, and 5 of your children's friends accept that contact. And the algorithm says, oh, well, if you know these people, you might also know these people.
Mhm.
And then just feeds them more and more children to connect with. And then eventually your child gets the connection and says, oh, wow, we've got 70 friends in common. I must know this person, except. So
Mhm.
that's how the system works for the trafficker. And it's low to no cost. All it costs them is their time, and they can cut and paste the same messages, and they can work multiple potential victims simultaneously. And that one victim, again, represents over $90,000 a year in tax-free income. So if they're working 3 victims, and or they get 3 victims that they're now selling online, those 3 victims are what, $270,000 a year in tax-free income. That's the equivalent of you or I making $500,000 a year.
So there's a lot, I'm gathering, reading between the lines here. While there's some bigger organizations doing this at scale, there's a ton of like small shop owners like this, where like one
Mhm.
psycho who's got, maybe 2 or 3 people that he's trafficking.
Yes, and so that's actually a predominant form of it. When we get into the networked human traffickers, that's actually predominantly within the illicit massage businesses. And a lot of those illicit massage businesses, and everybody knows, which ones they are. In fact, you can actually run the phone numbers of a massage parlor that you think is sketchy through our app, and if it is in our system, it'll pull up a red flag. A friend of mine who's a lawyer in Massachusetts did that with a massage parlor that he had suspicions about that was close to his kid's school when we released the app, and sure enough, he was able to report that. But then he took it one step further and actually reported it to his local law enforcement, and they opened an investigation. So
Nice.
excuse me, that's a great example of the power of the crowd and the power of putting data in the hands of the individual. However, those illicit massage businesses tend to be run primarily from actors overseas that are running those hierarchical organizations here in the United States. When it comes to the traditional model of human trafficking that we have here in the U.S., it's not this top-down hierarchy the way it was in the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s and double aughts. It's what I like to call loose affiliation of like minds. So you and I got connected. I don't even remember how, but you're in the space you've been in for forever, and I was in the space that I was in forever, and there's a lot of overlap there. And so we're 1 to 2 degrees of separation from pretty much everybody in our community. Well, it's the same thing for human traffickers. They coordinate, they work together, even though they're all running their own little micro business. They all work together. So if you have, say, the Consumer Electronics Show coming to Las Vegas, that's a huge market opportunity for traffickers in Las Vegas. So they'll contact their trafficker buddies in New York and Chicago and Lincoln, Nebraska, and say, hey, why don't you guys all come here? Bring your girls, and any profit, I'll set everything up, and any profits you get, we'll just split 50-50. Trafficker in Lincoln, Nebraska says that sounds like a good idea and ships his girls across the country to Las Vegas and sells them all along the way to make money from and pay for the trip.
Insane. I've seen a lot of stuff online, like little sting operations, where it's. I just saw one literally 2 days ago that was insane, and I couldn't see who was confronting them, but it was someone's grandfather had texted something about wanting to touch his granddaughter, and they confronted him about it, and he got all flustered. I saw another one of this politician trying to pick up a 12-year-old boy, and these pedophiles are everywhere, and always have been. And there, you mentioned earlier, hey, the crowdsourcing metaphor, amazing. Let's get every good, conscientious person with a flashlight, your forest metaphor. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So bear with me as I'm figuring out what I'm trying to ask here. And you mentioned, hey, this, like, let's get it here. And you mentioned jujitsu schools. There's been like dozens in the last couple of years of stories where the lead instructor at a karate school or jiu-jitsu school was school teachers sexually exploiting. And this is an interesting thing because, like I want to say, the sexual abuse. If you got a hot school teacher and you're 16, you don't think of it as sexual abuse. You're like, holy shit. There's a weird dynamic there. But these predators are everywhere. In religious institutions. Certainly, I think there might be a couple in Hollywood and the government. Rumor has, I don't know, there might be one or two. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you address that? Because it's you don't even know who you're talking to if you go, hey man, DeliverFund, you got to check this out, and this guy's going, oh, thanks for that, and he's the guy too. I mean,
sure. So that's an interesting question I get a lot, and here's the way that I'd like to help people understand it. Do you know that the Central Intelligence Agency exists? Yes, you do.
Of course.
They got a freaking website. You can go to CIA.gov. They put all kinds of information out, right? The CIA World Fact Book is out there. Do you know that there are covert operatives at the CIA? Yes. You might even know some. I guess as with your contacting experience, you probably do. Do you know what street corner they are on right now and what operation they're conducting? No. So you don't really know how the sausage is made, right? That's what happens with our human trafficking app. So I assume the biggest, baddest, smartest human trafficker is listening to this right now, and I hope they are, because they're going to understand that they have a Hobson's choice. They can continue to do what they do, and eventually we will catch them, or law enforcement will, or somebody will end up reporting them. Or they can stop, in which case I win either way, right? Because if you're truly setting up a fight in the way that if you're truly setting it up in the right way, it means you win no matter what happens, right?
Right.
It's a Hobson's choice for that trafficker. Well, it's the same thing here. Traffickers use burner phones, they use burner email addresses, they do all of that. Well, I can tell you as a former spy that we screwed that stuff up all the time. So if professionally trained spies screw up their tradecraft, how often do you think traffickers screw it up? And we harvest data at such a scale that they could have 99% perfect tradecraft, and we would still catch them because we brought in that 1%. And then what they know is that we're harvesting communications information. But what they don't know is how the computers on the back end are doing the math to exploit that one time they made a mistake, right? That one time out of 100 they made a mistake, and connect that one mistake to all 100 of their actions. And so that's why we're very open about what we do. And we're very open about roughly how it works. We don't get into the math and the algorithms behind it. But what we can tell you is that if you are a trafficker and you are listening to this, and you are using the internet, which they all have to use the internet in order to make money at the scale they need to make it. If they're using the internet, there's no possible way that they can avoid us over even over the course of a year, much less over the course of their trafficking career.
Nice. Do you have any numbers that would be appropriate to share in terms of, one, phone goes in, it's red. What's the timeline to cops contacting and stopping somebody, and like any success numbers on that, or numbers of, just like, hey, this, you're the fighter, how many wins, how many losses, like how many people. Yeah.
So we have a couple of statistics that we're extremely proud of. One, when it comes to points of interest within our data set, and when we talk about data, data points, it's billions and billions and billions. But points of interest, right? So like when you look at data as an example of measuring something, data isn't really that big of a deal. You have access to all the data in the world right through Google. But that's not all the data in the world is relevant to you. So the points of interest is the signal, the thing that's really relevant to you. Within our database, we've got over 3 billion points of interest. So it's a real big data play that we're doing here. The second is on the cases that we've been involved in that have gone to court, we have a 100% conviction rate. And the reason why is the electronic evidence is so damning that really traffickers can't fight it. Most of the cases, and the major majority, go to a plea deal, which obviously saves taxpayers money and saves the prosecutors a whole lot of headache. Most of them go to a plea deal. The few that the traffickers actually decide to roll their dice in court because they understand that it's going to be bad for them either way, so they may as well take the small percentage chance. The biggest sentence that we've gotten is 4 life sentences nice. For a human trafficker in the desert Southwest. So what we find is that the time that law enforcement receives a report to the time that action is taken against a trafficker, that's something nobody can control. So we don't really measure that. Because you might have your human trafficking detective is on vacation. The trafficker might move out of that jurisdiction by the time that the detective gets to it. So we don't really focus on that. But we do know that with the methodology that we brought to law enforcement, coming from the counterterrorism world, we found that your best human trafficking detectives were taking about 21 days to close a case start to finish. And most detectives will tell you that that's pretty quick. And that means they've got a rock star prosecutor. We reduce that down to 6 hours. Wow. That's the power of data and the power of the technology stack that we're providing. And we're ultimately working towards my goal, which is it doesn't even take 6 seconds. My goal is it's predictive, and it actually spoon feeds the human trafficking detective what they need. As soon as a trafficker enters their jurisdiction, the human trafficking detective is getting the information. So we're marching towards that. We're a long ways from it, but that's what our engineers and team are doing on a daily basis.
Amazing. It's nice to hear, because I think a lot of us, like one of my taglines is, "You're the first responder in your fight." The guy you 100%. Call, the guy or gal you call the first responder is the second responder. And there's lots of thoughts and ideas like, hey, the police aren't going to be there, especially after the last 3 years. It's going to be, so the fact that this has gone from 3 weeks to 6 hours, depending on where, and a couple of other factors, is that's way faster than I thought. So that's kind of exciting and motivating, because if you said, well, we don't know, we have no information, it could be a year or two, that kind of demotivates you to punch that number in. Or follow through, because you're going, well, what difference is this going to make? So folks, if you're listening, this is getting faster. I don't know if this is the place, and say it's not the place, because I have friends and acquaintances in the world that do what I believe you refer to as the rogue operations. They're out there. Are you referring to like some of the bigger, more public groups that go undercover and try and rescue the girls overseas? Or are you talking about, and this may, again, this is a
sure.
very...
No, yeah, I can address that. So, groups that are doing it overseas, I don't really have an opinion on, because I don't focus overseas.
Right.
And so if they're doing that work overseas, they're the expert at that overseas. And, maybe they've got something figured out that I don't know about. I mean, it's not really my place to comment on that. I kind of believe that, if they're trying to do something and they've thought it through and it's meaningful, and you've got traffickers are getting arrested and there's actual fruit to show from that labor, go for it. Awesome. Let me know how I can help. But when it comes to the United States of America, these rogue vigilante operations do not work. One, most of the time, the people doing them a lot of times they don't realize this. They're actually committing felonies themselves. Two, do you remember To Catch a Predator? Way back in the day, there was a TV show called To Catch a Predator. And I believe the guys, Chris Hansen, would bring people in, and the law enforcement would arrest them. My understanding is that a single one of those cases was actually successfully prosecuted. So if you are doing these rogue vigilante operations to highlight pedophiles in your community, and you don't actually have somebody putting cuffs on them and they're not going to prison, not only are you not solving the problem, but you're actually making the problem worse. And I've gotten heat from this where people are like, oh, that's just because you're just a computer nerd. It's like, man, I got 30 combat deployments under my belt. I was a special operator and a CIA operative. I know as much about throwing lead as anybody on the planet. That is not the solution here. It is not the, like, let's go embarrass people on TikTok or Instagram. If you have somebody who you have that kind of evidence on, take it to your law enforcement officers, your local law enforcement. Hit up your city, hit up your county, hit up your constable, hit up, your AG's office, hit them all up and say, hey, I did this. And let them actually do the operation in a way that's legal, because what you might have found was somebody who part of a larger child exploitation ring that now maybe that goes into the deep dark web. So this, this rogue vigilante, like, I make myself feel like a hero and I make myself feel better because I do these operations on the weekend because I'm bored and don't have anything else to do from my mom's basement. Like get over your hero complex and actually get in, fight, and do the real hard work, or like actually do this full time. But I left what is a very cool job that nobody gets at the CIA. Some reason they picked me to be part of it, and I left that to do this full time. It is what I do and what I've dedicated my life to. So this, like, weekend warriors stuff is, to me, just a bunch of people who predominantly never really did anything and are trying to play cop for a day or trying to scratch that action guy itch that they never had the courage to scratch in the past. So the folks who are doing the overseas stuff, like, rock on, man, go do your thing. If it's working, and you can show fruit from that labor, I got no problem with that. But you won't find a single law enforcement officer, and you definitely won't find a prosecutor in the United States of America who is happy that you're complicating their cases. Also, when you are doing this work and you're doing these rogue vigilante, what I call embarrassment operations, you don't know that law enforcement doesn't have an active investigation and active operation that they're running against that person. And maybe you've got some law enforcement officer who's been tirelessly working that operation for a couple of weeks, is getting ready to put it in front of a prosecutor to get the case adopted, and then you come in and mess the whole thing up.
Right.
So like we as a society, I mean, if we're going to do work and we're going to do this type of thing, it's imperative that we do it in a way that's legal, and we do it in a way that actually affects change, instead of just creating a bunch of movement that we're confusing for progress.
I dig it, man. I appreciate that, and I know that to be true with an event that happened to me in 2010, where a bunch of friends from my family experienced a home invasion. I wasn't home at the time, and it was shocking. Guys with guns in my house with my three kids, and I don't talk about it a lot, but and I'm not going to I can't mention the guy's name or the agency he was with, but that night when I moved my family out of the house, we were all in a hotel and finally fell asleep at 2:00. I wrote, and everyone listen to this, I wrote a letter saying, anyone, anywhere, anytime, who would have thought, like me, as this, trusted combatives advisor for all different acronym agencies and military and law enforcement, that I would have a home invasion and I wouldn't be home at the time. And it's not even about being cavalier, because I know that I'd be dead, or something. Two of the kids were 17, 18. So they'd have been dead, or I'd have been dead, or then a combination, because I wouldn't have let them in my house. And I remember one of the VPs from Gavin DeBecker's company, who I was friends with, he told me, he said, I'm glad you weren't there, as hard as that is to accept, because the outcome would have been way different and way worse and life-changing permanently. If this had to happen, he said, this was the best home invasion because nobody was hurt and everyone was caught. But the
Mhm.
caught part is interesting. And I'm sharing this very private, intimate thing with everyone listening. And Nick, I don't think you know the story, but I
Mhm.
wrote this letter out and I BCC'd everyone I'd ever trained saying, you know, and I don't have to tell you this, kiss your family, love your family, because you don't know when something's going to happen. And I was up all night freaking out that, watching the SWAT cleared our house after, and the house was haunted. And okay, we're in a hotel and I'm watching my family sleep going, these fuckers came into our house with no masks on with guns. My son called 911 within 5 seconds of them in the house. He was upstairs. We lived in an area where that shit doesn't happen. Cops were there inside 2 minutes. They heard the sirens, they freaked and ran. But you know this, home invasion with no attempt to conceal your identity. We're like, what's going on 5 minutes after,
Yeah.
10 minutes later? So
Yeah.
like that was going through my head. I could have come home from this meeting and everyone would have been executed. And that freaked me out. And I'm sitting there. So I wrote this heavy letter to everybody in military and law enforcement that I had trained, and got the most amazing letters back. But one thing happened. They had caught three of the guys. They were missing another guy. I get a phone call from the Virginia Beach detective who's handling our case. And he said, hey, we can't have any of your buddies messing up this case. And you made me think of the story because of what Nick was saying, everybody, about people like on the weekend trying to catch the bad guy, catch the predator. I said to him, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, we got a message from this federal agency that they were sending a team in to come and get these guys. And I'm like, and again, I can't say who it is.
Sure.
So he mentions this organization. I call up exactly who it is. And these are people that I've trained over the years. And they basically said, dude, anyone fucks with you, you're our family. You've been training us for years. And I said, yeah, but you can't just hop on your own plane and fly here and kick that. You need to be officially requested by the local police. They were just literally emotionally getting on an airplane. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'll tell you when we get off here who it was.
Good to have friends like that in some
right?
instances.
Yeah. So the support was there. And here's the craziest serendipity of all this is the local PD couldn't find the guys. They ended up calling these other guys who ended up catching the guy. And it was actually somebody who I trained who dropped the guy, the last guy in this gang that they couldn't find. He was carrying a Desert Eagle and
Nice.
yeah, just insane. But folks, the moral of the story, again, it's cathartic every time I talk about it a little bit, but the good guys can't do their job properly if somebody else is missing up. What is the actual domino effect of prosecuting somebody and putting them behind bars? So
and
anyway.
I can talk to my kind of soft brothers here as well. If you're doing some type of operation, counter human trafficking operation, you're doing that in conjunction with your law enforcement officers and the sheriff or the chief of police or the captain or whoever signed off on the whole thing, great, go for it. But I say this as a former, special ops operator. It's very arrogant of us in the former special ops types to think that just because we got firefights under our belt in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and wherever else, that applies to the law enforcement officer here in the United States of America. I mean, our rules of engagement and whatnot, we thought they were restrictive, but compared to what law enforcement has to deal with, they were wide open, and it was the Wild West. I mean, very rarely were we looking at murder charges. Sometimes we were. After we drop somebody, very rarely do we have to do any paperwork. Well, law enforcement officers are all dealing with that. And so to come in and say, beat our chests and say, I'm a barrel-chested freedom fighter and move out of the way, law enforcement officer, let me show you how to do this, is extremely arrogant and quite frankly disrespectful to law enforcement officers who are the experts at their craft. And so we need to, we are the experts in operating overseas against those overseas threat actors, not in operating in the United States of America under the umbrella of the Constitution. And so we, we being the former special ops and intelligence community folks need to take a step back and play a supporting role. We are no longer the primary actor here. We are no longer the primary effort. The law enforcement officer with the sworn law enforcement officer with the badge and the gun and the handcuffs, they are the ones who are responsible on this territory. So we need to take a step back and we need to play that supporting role. We need to not be trying to do the action guys stuff and do the stuff that, because they know how to do that and they're really good at it. They need help with intelligence. They need help with data. They need help with the keyboard stuff that nobody really wants to do. But that's really the important part, right? Everybody wants to make a movie about SEAL Team 6 kicking in a door and shooting bin Laden in the face. And that's awesome. That's incredible work. And our country owes those heroes an absolute debt of gratitude. But what about the group of women who spent 10 years figuring out which door for the SEALs to kick? Right. That's the true hard work that required so much patience and persistence. And that's really the part that law enforcement needs help with. And so if there is no fruit of the labor, if the only fruit of the labor is an Instagram video embarrassing somebody, well, you actually have probably just made the person worse or made the problem worse.
Yeah, that's a great, the bin Laden example is great story, because those guys didn't accidentally, fast rope onto that property. There was
right.
It's like, hey, what about that?
Yeah, I was right next door in Kandahar, and I was sitting on a QRF package for that operation, and obviously we were bored out of our minds. We never got to go anywhere that night, but we didn't even know what it was we were sitting alert for. We were just told, don't take water, take lots of bullets, and you're probably, if you go, you're going to get in the firefight of your life. And so I'm looking at these damn net guys, and they're like, where are we going? And they're like, we don't know. You're the intelligence guys. Like, you tell us. And right. But we tend to look at the action stuff and be like, man, that's so amazing. And it really is. But it's all that intelligence work. It's all the data analytics. It's all the investigation work that goes in.
That's a great
years in front of it.
One last question, and there's one or two questions in the audience. One last question so you got this cool job at the CIA. What compelled you to go, you know what, I'm walking from this and I'm starting DeliverFund, or whatever you called it in the beginning. What was it that made you just, because it's not even like a pivot, right? I mean, this is like, that's an abrupt shift to do that. What was that?
Yeah, believe it or not, it actually is a pivot, because I was, so when I was at the agency, I had the good fortune, really, of being lucky enough to be selected to participate in something experimental. And so even though I was a, for lack of a better term, shooter by trade, I got to go to some analysis courses and electronics courses and whatnot. So I really got to see the magic of data and technology, and did a fair amount of that on top of the operational work that I was doing at the agency. So I knew kind of what needed to be done. And I knew that we had a counterterrorism center to coordinate and deconflict terrorism cases, but we didn't have that for human trafficking. So that's what I set out to build. But really one of the things that there's a lot of different things that kind of all came together at once. One was we had an operation in Afghanistan on the AfPak border involving a where we collected intel on a human trafficker who was selling children across the AfPak border, and we kind of figured out there was nowhere to put that information. Right, pretty clear where guns information goes and drug information goes and terrorism information goes, but where's human trafficking operation, right? Where does that information go? We ultimately found there wasn't one. But another one was, I was coming off of, 17 years in the government, 17 and a half years, pretty much all of that was in combat operations. And GWAT wasn't going to miss Nic McKinley. They were just going to replace me with a younger, faster, smarter, stronger version. But nobody was really doing anything on this human trafficking space. And so that really was a fork in the road where I had to decide. And it was it was William Wilberforce who said that, you know, when he was trying to convince the crown in England to abolish the slave trade there, he said in one of his speeches, you can choose to look away, but you can never again say you did not know. And that was really the fork in the road I was at. It was, okay, well, I can continue to just do the terrorism thing and, you know, probably a minimal impact, or I can swing for the fences and try to go do this thing that nobody's ever done before and try to have a global impact on the fight against human trafficking. And so I decided I was going to go do the scary, risky thing, probably because my risk tolerance meter is a little bit broken, and I decided to go. That's what I was going to go do.
Well, it's an amazing story. I did not know that at that level of detail, and it's amazing that you're doing that. And thank you for that, man. And now that I understand more about the app's capabilities, I'm going to push that more through my channels and my newsletter and get that out. I love the flashlight metaphor, parents, and crowdsourcing this data, you know, for you guys. And we'll share this newsletter. We'll share this interview in the newsletter again, because parents need to listen to this. When you watch these fucking people blocking traffic and gluing their feet and gluing their hands to things in a museum and shit like that, that's your fucking fault. Parents, that's your fault. Sorry. And you know, of course, our education system and all of that, but don't get me started on that. I know I got 32-year-old, 26-year-old, and 21-year-old, and they're all different in terms of, one's a little bit woke, one's fucking like mini me, but female. The other one's more of a bohemian, you know, athlete. They're very, very different, but they will never glue themselves to a picture to fight climate change. You'll never see my kids sitting in traffic, holding hands, blocking people from going to work or getting to a hospital for some cause. It's fucking insane. Parents, get your shit together.
And you know, if people are, you know, that interested in climate change, okay, go build the next Tesla. Go do something that's actually going to move the needle on the problem you care about. If everybody in this listening to this just cared about the person to their right, that's it. Everybody did that, eventually it would come full circle and people would actually care about them, right? And we would have such a better society. And if people, instead of talking about problems and talking about how terrible they are, if they actually just took action and realized that in the modern age of technology, action, quite frankly, doesn't really cost you much. You don't have to do that much.
Right.
You can do it while you're waiting for the Uber Eats to come to your door, because you don't have to go out and kill your food anymore. I mean, we have gotten to a place in society where comfort has become our drug. And we feel as if we are being victimized if we are not comfortable, and we're being victimized if we actually have to do something. And if people would just get out of that mindset and just understand, if you're the biggest climate change advocate in the world, rock on, but go do something, right? Go create some biofuels, go do something. And then if you're somebody who completely thinks that climate change is a complete hoax, okay, awesome. Don't get down on the person who's creating the biofuels, because guess what? Now that's making us less reliant on Saudi oil, which is good for our national security. So if we just as a society would just come together with action and actually realize that we have a lot in common, regardless of what side of the aisle we're on, if we would just choose to look for that instead of go look for all of the ways that we're different.
Love it. Very wise, sage-like advice after my emotional rant screaming at parents. Hey, a couple of quick questions here. This is a neat one from Paul. Going back in time, he says, what can we teach our adolescent kids to look out for in their friends? He says, I'm a good dad, 5 kids, Good work there, Paul. But what can I teach his kids to watch out for in their own network to keep their friends safe?
This is awesome. And I'm really glad you brought this, Paul. So when you look at preteen girls and teen girls who are trafficked, and you look at the like almost trafficking incidents that happen where the girl doesn't quite become trafficked because authority figures and law enforcement gets involved, you know what every single one of those stories has in common? So one of their friends reported this potential trafficking victim as a potential trafficking victim. You know who it usually is, considering that we're talking about preteen girls and teen girls? Who pays attention to preteen girls and teen girls? Preteen boys and teen boys. So teaching your friends that, hey, like, or teaching your children this about human trafficking, but then also telling them that if they see one of their friends potentially going down this path, it is not narking on them to go tell an authority figure or a parent. It is actually saving their life. No different than if they found their friend unconscious in the bathroom from a fentanyl overdose. They would go get help. That's not narking on their friend. It's saving their life. This human trafficking thing is exactly the same. So helping your children, one, understand for themselves what it looks like. But fathers and mothers have been trying to convince their preteen daughters and their teen daughters for millennia that the guys they're talking to are no good. And that has yet to ever sink in. I was raised with three sisters. I watched it happen. And so oftentimes the education of the victim or the potential victim, because we're talking about predominantly a female issue here, they don't really see it, obviously, through the same lens that everybody else does. So helping your children understand, if they see it happening with their friends, they need to get an authority figure involved before it's too late.
Love it. Paul, thank you for the question. It's a great question. Great answer. This one, easy one. When's this coming out on Android, right? We only see it on Apple, or is it coming out on Android?
Yep. It's only available on Apple right now. We're in some back and forth with Google about getting it on the Google Play Store, but we will do an announcement. So if you go follow my Instagram at the.nic.mckinley, that's nic.mckinley. I'll be making an announcement, and follow DeliverFund at DeliverFund, and we'll be making an announcement there as well.
Beautiful. Here's I think you already answered this, but I'll put it up here from Michael. Nic, do you ever regret the career change?
Oh man, that's a tough question. You know, I was gone almost 10 months a year for 17 and a half years. So I've got a wife and wonderful children now, and that wouldn't work if I was gone 10 months a year. So I think a better question is, do I miss the work every single day? But it's so much more important for me to be under my roof with my wife and kids and investing in them. And, there's, again, the country just replaced me with a younger, faster, smarter, stronger version. So he's out there somewhere doing more than I ever could have.
Beautiful. Good question. And in this chapter, in many ways, the work you're doing before was, these micro targets, where now you're impacting potentially, thousands, if not tens of thousands of kids in the future, as creates a groundswell. So this is a way bigger battle war than the counterterrorism stuff in many ways. So
that's right. I like to think of us as the defense industrial contractor that's creating the weapons that fights human trafficking.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Gang, there's your app. Go get it. As a parent, I know I'm going to show this to my kids, even though they're grown up, and say, hey, here's the app. You have permission to, I'll pay for it as dad. Download it. If you get hit up with anybody, and all three of my kids will have this, you get any friend, get a weird number, a real text, a weird, I get random shit from WhatsApp all the time. Hey, is this? And I love fucking with people. Hey, it's can you meet me in the lobby? Is this Bill? And I'm going, I can't say some of the things I say, but I fuck with these people. But my kids are all, I'm going to get them access to this, punch the number in there. If it comes up red, just follow the stuff, because you know, you made a human observation that might have slipped by a lot of people. You know, my daughter's finally dating somebody my wife approves of, right? So the idea is, she's 26 years old now, but the idea of, like, when she was dating somebody 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, who's this guy?
Right.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy? You know, but it's the same thing, is create that relationship, and there's easy conversation. There's bad people out there, and you will get hit up by people if they're just punch their number in here. If it comes in red, follow that, come tell me. And that's the start if you don't have the perfect relationship. Let me pop up your website here, or part of your website. Go support these guys. This is, if you got to know Nic a little bit better, go to their website. It's pretty impressive, all the stuff there. Nic, any final things that we're going to get off and you go, shit, we didn't talk about this, or anything else you want to share?
No, I greatly appreciate you helping us get the word out. I ask everybody, go follow us on all the social channels, share all of this information with your networks, because the more we collectively work together, the harder it is for these, quite frankly, bags of human trash to hide, and eventually we'll work together and we'll catch them all.
I love it. Nic, you're always invited back on, or welcome back on, if you got something to share, some new technology, et cetera, et cetera. Stand by in the back, because we're going to talk a little bit. Everyone, thank you for taking time out in the middle of your day. This is one of those, I never ask you guys to share stuff, but this is one of the ones to share. All of you know a parent, if you're not a parent, who needs to listen to this and understand this stuff. And go download the app, and let's make the world safer together. Okay, Nic, stand by. Everyone else, have a great day.
Thanks, Tony.